is we do a crisis crunch. We look at their budget. We try to find why they were declined.
Okay.
A lot of times, for example, we have homeowners that are on unemployment, but they're waiting for a modification and been waiting for a decision for 4 months. Well, obviously, a modification doesn't go hand in hand with the unemployment homeowner. Homeowners that are unemployed normally gets reviewed for forbearance.
Okay.
That should take no more than a 45-minute conversation with the servicer.
Wow.
Okay, so that's the educational piece. The other piece is if they're declining for a modification and they don't want the forbearance, that's where the Keep Your Home California comes in, because they also have a unemployment program as well. So it all kind of goes hand in hand.
Right. So the unemployment piece, though, what we talked about is that if a homeowner is unemployed, then Keep Your Home California actually has the ability, if the homeowner qualifies, to actually make up to six months worth of mortgage payments.
Absolutely.
And there's a maximum amount, and I'm not sure I don't know it off the top of my head, but they won't make your $8,000 a month mortgage payment for 6 months, but I think it's $3,000.
It's $3,000, yes.
Is what they will do for up to 6 months. That really helps you, during the process of looking for a job.
Right.
So that's one of them.
Right.
And then we talked about if a person just gets denied and they have to move.
Right.
They have to either sell the house or they actually do what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Then Keep Your Home California has what for them?
A transitional program where they have funding for the homeowner to transition through their transition process of moving into another, housing.
So it basically gives them an amount of money to actually go out and either rent a house or rent an apartment.
Right.
And I think it's even said that some of those funds could be used for if you need to rent a moving truck, to actually, go from one place to the other.
Right.
So that's another part of the Keep Your Home
California. And the Keep
program.
Your Home California is not mirrored with the investor. It is a direct relationship with the servicer.
Okay.
So the investors are not included in the Keep Your Home
So
California.
there's nobody behind the scenes pulling strings.
There's no.
The real major piece was actually the actual debt forgiveness. I'm sorry.
Principal forgiveness.
Principal reduction. Talk to me about that, because we don't hear a lot about that.
Right, and we actually, the program came out in the early part of 2011, and because of the guidelines, the underwriting guidelines that they had, we actually wasn't able to get a lot of people in that program. So they just recently reduced the caveats in order for homeowners to get in. For example, they didn't want anyone to have any cash out, which is almost impossible, for the last.
So now when you say cash out, the original program was designed so that if you'd actually refinanced your home and pulled any cash out, then you weren't eligible.
Right.
Or if you had a second mortgage or a line of credit, which in Southern California, we won't say everybody had, but lots of people had it, or in the state of California, period.
Right.
So now they've changed that so that it says what now?
Okay, so now what it says is you are allowed to have cash out.
Okay.
And then another caveat, I believe, was that you could not own any other properties.
Okay.
Okay, so they lifted those two, which now gave a little bit more activity. So the principal forgiveness is really great because the Making Home Affordable program is not really, that's not appetizing for them. I mean, I've seen maybe one or two. With this one, they are doing the it's not a principal forgiveness, but it's, if the homeowner has lost equity in the property, they're going to meet the servicer halfway and giving the homeowner a lower principal, but they're actually making up the mortgage payment at the lower principal balance. So really, they're not having a new loan; they're just making up the payment difference at a lower loan amount.
Right. So if my home that I purchased has an existing mortgage of, let's say, $400,000. I think that gets me under my cap. But it's only worth $200,000. Then really what the principal reduction says is that when they actually look at what my payments are, they're going to reduce the principal balance so that I may be making a mortgage payment on $200,000 as opposed to making a mortgage payment on my existing loan of $400,000.
Yes.
Okay.
From an investor standpoint, what I explain to the homeowners is if you were an investor, and your property did decrease by $200,000, what will I gain out of reducing your principal to $200,000? Because if your intent is to keep your property, 7 or 8 years down the line, your property may go back up. Are you going to give me back my $200,000? Logically, that is from an investor standpoint of thinking. That's the way I look at it. Mm-hmm. What confuses the homeowners is that, so if I give up my property, you're going to put it on the market for $200. Why don't you just give it to me for $200?
Right.
But it doesn't work that way.
Sure.
So yeah, the principal reduction or the principal forgiveness, I see very little. That percentage is very low.
Okay. And I mean, I get that question all the time, and I get the logic all the time too. But that's a great explanation, because at some point, you're either going to, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose it all, right, and I'm going to lose it on my terms. I'm not going to lose it on your terms. Exactly. Which is what a lot of people want the investors to do. Right. The one thing that we haven't talked about or gone into detail about, and which I also think is a part of Keep Your Home California, is the forbearance piece. And how does that work? Because a lot of people say, oh my gosh, I can't make my mortgage payment, but the situation is temporary. Mm-hmm. For instance, we know that a lot of teachers have gotten furloughs where they've got to take 1 or 2 days off a month. A lot of state and city employees around the entire state have been under this budget crunch. So it's not a permanent situation. How does the forbearance work on that? Sure. The forbearance is typically saying, you know what, as a homeowner, I have a temporary hardship. It's not permanent, it's temporary. But I do foresee my situation changing. Mm-hmm. Okay? So in that instance, they offer a forbearance, just saying, we'll give you 6 months or 8 months at this amount, okay? And as long as you make this payment, it could be at 31% of your gross income or of your new gross income, and you can make this payment that will be affordable to you based on your paycheck stubs, and we will go ahead and forbear it. But once you forbear, you have to remember that your consensual amount was this, and they're going to give you a forbearance amount of this. You still owe them that in between. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, within the 6 to 8 months, there's no change. You still have that middle portion that you didn't pay to your servicer. What they have the ability to do under a modification is take that arrearage and put it back into your loan and give you a fresh start. Okay. So a great example is, I'm a teacher, I'm on furlough. But then guess what? I got a new job. I found a second job. And so now I can make my actual payment. So what they would do is say, we're not going to ask you for that middle portion of, example, $40,000 that you didn't make for the last 8 months. We'll just put it on the back and give you a fresh start. So it really is a fresh start loan. Okay. Yeah. That's really great. And then you have the repayment plan, which is a little different. The repayment plan is for the homeowners who's, was in a hardship, but now they're making a lot more income. Their income has increased. So now Mr. Homeowner can say, you know what, I can make that payment. I know I can. So what they'll do is they'll take the arrearage, amortize it over 12 or 8 months, and then you'll have a slightly higher payment, but then you're now back on track within 6 months. Okay, that's really good. That's really good to know. This is such great information. I'm glad you're able to hang out with me today. Something else that you mentioned and I wanted to talk about, and that is, you mentioned a package, a homeowner's package. What's in that package and what happens to it? Well, what happens with the package basically tells your story. It's very important, and I say this to a lot of my homeowners. When we look at the package, we basically underwrite it because, and we'll talk about this later, sometimes you don't need a modification. There's different areas within your budget or your credit that needs to be adjusted. So when we get the package, number one, we look at their budget, okay? We see if there's a negative, a deficit, or if there's a positive. We also look at your bank statements. We want to see how you're budgeting your money and what you're spending it on. Sometimes it's invasive, but it gives us a picture. Okay, you also need to have your credit piece so we can see how many credit cards you have, okay? Then with the tax returns and the paycheck stubs, we're able to get a clear picture of what your income really is. Okay. Paycheck stubs can sometimes show that you have a lot of deductions that you don't need. So if you can make an adjustment on the deductions, you'll have more cash for your home. Sometimes when we look at the bank statements, we can see how much overall you're spending, which is not necessary.
And once we total that up, if you have a positive of like $1,000 because you're eating out, you're not making life adjustments, we go through that, which is our budget counseling, to say, you know what, if we do this adjustment, this adjustment, this adjustment, you know, instead of having a gardener, why don't you go ahead and cut the grass? Instead of, you know, getting nails done and hair done and things like that, you have to make life adjustments because you want to keep your home. Right. Sometimes they don't see that. It's like, am I really spending this amount of money?
Right.
Yes, you're eating out like every single day. But we have no money. You would if you go ahead and do the budget counseling. It's really, really interesting because sometimes when we do that, it's not a modification you need. You just needed to alter your lifestyle.
Right.
Okay. So that's why it's very important. The credit piece. Sometimes we can get homeowners whose credit cards are just as high as their mortgage payment. But what they do is they choose to make the credit card payments because they're suffering and they need that line access. Well, you can do it. You can do a credit consolidation. If you do that, you don't need this modification.
Right.
Yeah, it's all in perception because everybody sees it on television. Everyone's getting these modifications. And then mentally you think, well, I want one because we're suffering too. But it's like putting it all together to tell the story is what the package is for. Once I get a clear story of really you're in a hardship, we then are able to submit the package to the servicer.
Awesome. Awesome. That is such a great insight. And I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Listen, I want you at some point to be able to come back and share with us because I think we could ask you another 100, 150 questions, and I think you could answer all of them. So we really appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me, Ameer.
It's been an awesome time. I'm your host of Monrovia Real Estate Today, Ameer Elahee. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.